Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you and I make a deal. Hans Nieman sacrificed a queen. A beautiful, beautiful queen sacrifice. I will show you this game first. There are two more decisive games, including a beautiful combination by one of the players. Just the most beautiful thing. Takes advantage of the slightest inaccuracy and goes on to win the game. Three decisive games in the in the Masters section. Tata Steel, round 4. Hans Nieman. We start with him playing Arvind. We get knight f3, knight f6. So a ready, which is a straight up ready. This is what we get. It can kind of now with c4 transpose into various English games. Takes, and now knight to c3, knight to c7. I promise you, as strange as this looks, it is all theory. Short castles, e5. Now a3, rook to b8, and d3. You can see Arvind has spent some time, but not too much. Bishop to e7, knight to d2, and now bishop to d7. Sorry, I think I said d7 twice. And now, also not speaking clearly, give me a moment. Let's calm down and look at this game properly. Knight to c4. Look, black is playing in a very cagey manner with all of their pieces. That's not a piece, that's an empty square. And the rook here. White is trying to unleash this bishop, very much in the Catalan style. This bishop, we're not sure where it's going yet. It could go to any of these squares along this diagonal. Black could castle. In fact, after f6, f4, b5, it's a useful move to play. Kick the knight out to e3. Hans does just that. And he has perfectly equalized this position after 13 moves. And White's not really exerting that much pressure. Yes, this bishop is open, but black has done a phenomenal job of taking sufficient space. The knights can get in. The bishop is anchoring this knight in. The rook is off the diagonal and putting pressure. So black is more than comfortable. So now we get f5, which is a big decision. And it's not a good one, according to the engine. Again, according to me, maybe it's fine. Because you probably don't want to be taken. But here you could just take the pawn. Take the pawn. Knight takes e5, and just play this position and play something like knight f5. Knight to f5. Look to get one of the bishops. King to h8 would get played. You can play knight takes e7, queen takes e7, and then follow up with something like bishop to f4. And this is how you should maybe more treat the position. f5 is not a good move, and the reason is, firstly, we get knight to d4. And we're seeking to round this thing up. It's now just a target. It can't really be defended. You have to play g4, but this is just weakening your position so much. Now, king to h8 gets off this light square diagonal for the queen and the bishop. They were both going to look to utilize it in various positions. Now, bishop to d2, bishop to e8. Again, looks strange, but you might want to come this way and get on this diagonal, or play g6 and get the bishop out that way. Now, knight to e4 looks logical. Bishop to f7. And now bishop to c3. And Hans Nieman is winning. It's no longer just slightly better with the initiative. He's now tangibly winning. He can play b4. Takes. The bishop has to go back to d2. And now he can play bishop to b3. Queen to e1. And now knight to c5. And all of his pieces from that passive position he had, just rolling forward, all coming down the board. We've got rook to c1. That's fine. I'll play bishop to g8. Why can I do that? Because you have to play rook d1. You could argue rook d1 is excessive, considering you just moved the rook, and you should probably play something like knight to c4. But the problem is, you're getting knight to b3. And this bishop, it's not going to last forever. Now you can play rook d1. You can also play rook b1, but you're going to have to move the rook. So it's really tough. So rook d1 is what's played. a5 from Hans. King to h1. Knight b3 anyway. And now knight to c4. Takes. Rook takes. And now b3. And these pawns are just coming down the board. And you cannot stop them. Queen g3. a4. g5. You have to go for counterplay. You have to open up the king and go for counterplay. You are about to lose the game on this side of the board. a3. e3 takes, which is a slight inaccuracy from Hans. Now knight takes e5, rook to b6, pawn takes, knight takes, Rook at b2, but now I can play queen e8. d4, knight to c4, kicks the rook back to b1, and now b2. The pawn has gone simply too far. Rook f2 seeks to round the pawn up, but I can play queen c8, you can play rook to c2, and rook to c2 loses. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. Knight takes e5, sacrificing the queen. Gone. One move. We take back. Now you might say, wait, hang on. I get it. You sacrificed the queen, you took a knight and you took a rook. But this knight's hanging. It's not. Because if you, for example, play queen takes e5, you lose. Rook c1 check. Okay, simple. I don't take the queen. I take the pawn. Same here. Rook c1 check. You cannot stop it. You have to play queen e1, sacrifice the queen, back, queen takes, rook takes, and then still b1 queen, and you lose. You simply lose. Knight to c5 instead is played from this position. Knight to c5, trying to block the c file. That's fine. I'll just take the knight. You can play bishop e4. You might say, wait, hang on. Why don't you at least take the bishop back and get to this position? Well, I mean, this is fine. Yeah, rook takes c5. This is fine, I suppose, and you can try and defend with bishop e4. Because rook c1, now you don't have to take. You can play, for example, king g2. But this is still a miserable position to defend, because the thing is, bishop a2 might be coming to just remove this. So bishop to e4 played instantly. Now the knight gets to c4. Now we take the bishop. Rook takes c5, and now queen f2. Knight drops back to d6, hits the bishop. Bishop drops to c2. A check. Oh my gosh, I went all the way back to the beginning. Sorry about this, ladies and gentlemen. Check. King over to g1. Now the knight comes in. Queen e2 is wrong, because now knight to c3 is a fork. You go here, I pick up the rook. You push the pawn, you're threatening promotion and mates. But I just take the bishop. You take my bishop, I take here, you check. You pick up, you could pick up the rook, but you're going for perpetual. You hunt my king out. Actually, Hans has to go on a king run. He loses his rook, but knight d2 is fine. There are now no more checks in the position, and this pawn will simply promote. And the game is won. I think queen c5 was the last move played, and king e2. And even though you can take the rook, I promote, you sack, I take, and a knight with 3 pawns versus a king and 1, completely winning. Now, we must go to the next game. Tata van Nguyen, I think I keep butchering his last name, versus Nordbek Abdusatorov. Now, Tata has done very, very well so far. He's been undefeated, and he's one of the underdogs. I mean, look at his rating, 2656 versus a lot of 2700, 2750 grandmasters. I mean, Arjun Erigaisi is pushing 2800s. So, very, very strong field. It's the youngest field ever in Tata Steel. And he's one of them, and he's performed very, very well. But he's coming up against a very informed Nordbek Abdusatorov. e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, a Petrov defense. We take. We play d6, takes, d4, and we get all of this mainline stuff. These guys barely have to think. Nordbek spent some time to consider which option he takes. He plays c5, bishop e3 here. And if you will recall, there was a game not so long ago where the bishop was over here. Okay? It was in round 1 where I believe it was Fedoseev blundered to Hans Nieman. But now we get bishop e2. So the Petrov is not so simple. Not so simple. To the point, we play this. Now you do want... Black plays this to try and encourage white to take. But they also sometimes reserve the option to take, although black would be ruining their pawn structure, even though white takes like this, and then you could maybe try to push the pawn. So it requires calculation. So we play knight to d2. We look to remove the knight. Now rook to e8. Now knight out to b3. Don't want to take the knight anymore. You can play a5. I will play rook to c1. You can play b5. I will go knight a1. Knight a1. Look at that. Knight drops back to e7. Now I can play knight to c2. Why all this knight rerouting after queen d3? c6. Is this knight perfectly placed? Is the question we have to ask. White's better, slightly. Well, this knight's doing a fantastic job defending this pawn. if nothing else. It can't really do much more. I suppose if takes, there's a position where it could get here. But again, for what end? Bishop now moves to f4. Now there's g6. Now you can take, and rook takes. And you've almost won a pawn. Queen comes out. Now rook ce1. Takes, queen drops back. And now we go here. And we're looking to trade with more pieces. Noordebek has won a pawn. Rook here pins the bishop. So we play queen f4. Takes, rook takes. And now here. That knight. Defending this. Rook e4. And Noordebek's just up a pawn. h5, I can play b3. You're trying to run out of moves, I trade queens, and I play knight to e3. That golden knight that did a fantastic job of defending this, its now job is to block the e-file for black, and look to trade off another piece. You are simply up a pawn. Now, queen endgames are notoriously difficult to win, even if you're up a pawn, simply because there is always the chance that you blunder perpetual check. But that's not happening, and a4 is not helping. We play e4, and Noordebek loses every single piece of advantage he has. Queen e6, queen f3, and now a3. It looks logical, because if you can get to this pawn is 2 squares away from queening. The thing is, can you get to this before I push you down and promote, is the question. Because now I bring king f2. You come forward, and now I play queen e3. And you give check, and I run the king. And you can go here. I just realized the sound is off. And now king d3. And now here. And now king c3. And black resigns. Down to 6 seconds versus 40 minutes, just by the way. Although it was the 40th move. So had Tie-Dye made his final move, he would have gotten more time. Now, simply because he's got 6 seconds, I would be inclined to think he may have flagged. Although I'm fairly certain he just resigned. This position is lost completely. The only move you have here is b4 check, but I will just play king takes b4. You might say, wait, hang on. It's quite clear what the king wants. He's going to come win this. Is there really nothing I can do? Like, can I not get in? You can't. White covers all the infiltration squares, and eventually we'll win this, and we'll just push all the pawns up the board, and there's nothing you can do. This position is indefensible. And so we move on to the final result of the day. Yakovar Sundarov versus Matthias Blubom. Matthias Blubom with the white pieces. He plays d4. Knight to f6, c4, and g6. Now we're getting one of two things. We are getting a Grundfeld, or we're getting a King's Indian. Both are very, very exciting. Now we see knight to c3, bishop g7. This means we're getting a King's Indian. e4, d6, knight f3, short castles, h3, which is a line. It's interesting. Now a5, bishop to e3, knight a6, which looks silly, but often once you play c5 or e5, white pushes here, and then you can nestle your knight very nicely on c5. Bishop to d3, and there's e5, short castles. Now we take. Now knight takes, and now you play knight to c5. You target the light squared bishop, it drops back to c2, and this is just a very complicated position, quite frankly. Simply because it's kings in, and they are always very, very difficult. Because black has tactics all over the place. None of them work just yet, but this bishop, if it gets any scope, it's a nightmare. What you've allowed by white, by not pushing the pawn and allowing the capture, is there's an open e-file. Now, black's not going to get their typical King's Indian attack where all these pawns march down the board and you try to mate each other. And they've also played a5, taking space on the queen side. So you may not even get your typical queenside play. So it's a very maneuvering game, and there are tactics all over the place. Black's big weakness is this light squared bishop. White can probably utilize all their pieces, although maybe not to their full effect. Now, queen d2 always seems nice because you want to go here. So let's see how we get Matthias playing. So first, rook e8 from Sundarov. Now f3, securing the center. c6, queen d2, same plan. a4, and now rook ad1. Queen out to a5, bishop to f4, and now knight out to e6, looking for exchanges. We play bishop to e3. Now knight over here. You've put a lot of pawns on light squares. My knight can go out this way and look to round some of them up. And now knight takes a4. Knight takes a4. Is this the beginning of the end? I mentioned it would take just one inaccuracy. So, let's just count. So, queen sees each other. Queen sees knight, but can't take it. Rook sees knight as well. Knight looking to come in here. Bishop sees knight. Knight sees knight. Everything sees each other. So, we get knight takes d4. Now, you have to be so careful as white. You take like this. That's fine. Bishop takes d4 check. Still fine. Queen takes d4. Still fine. But now, queen g5. You are going to have some problems very, very soon. f5, here he comes, here's the rook, here's the bishop. How do you defend? Well, we play rook d2. Now, many of you would want to sacrifice this bishop. You can. You very much can. f4, though, is a bit problematic, because then you've got to play queen g3, and now rook f3 is a problem. Queen e1 check, you just about escape, and then rook f1, it's a draw. If not rook f1 and king h2, then bishop d7 and black's okay. So you got to be very careful. So instead, what we get is knight to f4. Now king h1. Now queen h6. And we take here. Very brave move. Bishop takes h3. Pawn takes h3. Rook e6. Important move. Because the queen may want to get on this diagonal. So the queen's got no way to go at h3. So now we get queen c5. Blunder. I just want you to look at this position. White is up 4 points of material. They're up a bishop and a pawn. That king is not safe. Now you might think, oh, it's fine, I'll survive. You will not survive. The difficult is, if you calculate all the way through, and Sandarov has 20 minutes to do so, and I'm scrolling down too far. The best move here is queen d7. Why? Because I told you, you've got to stay active. You've got to stay watching stuff and stay nearby and give checks and so on and so forth. Because queen takes h3 check, king g1, queen g3 check, king h1, queen h3 is a draw. If you block, you lose because you hang the rook. So that is important. Now you might say, what's the difference? What's the difference after this and queen here? Is there not still queen here? No. The difference is king g1 and queen g3 check. But I'm not going to take the pawn. I'm going to put my knight here. A move that looks impossible. It's a simple idea. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d2. You cannot defend this rook. And you're also losing the queen. That is the difference. The queen is hit by the knight. It was not hit over there. So now, rook takes d3. Mistake. Why? Because now I can take on h3. And now when you go here, I can give you check. Here. And now g5. Bye-bye. Rook mate. Game over. And after those decisive results, let us take a quick look. We go to the homepage of Tata Steel Chess. And we are going to have a look in the master section how the table stands, and you will be very surprised to see, perhaps not. Round 4, there was wins for Nordbek Abdusatorov, Yakovar Sandarov, Hans Nieman. Everyone else draws. Now, Anish and Van Forest had to survive their games. It was tough draws. Gukesh and Prague making a draw, and what was the other draw? Yegiz Khan and Vincent Keimer. Tough games. Now the standings, we do have 2 leaders. It is Hans Nieman and Nordbek Abdusatorov, both on 3 points. There are then 3 players on 2.5, Sandarov, Van Forest, Erigaisi. Then it is Yegiz Khan Erdochmus, Gukesh Namaraju, Vladimir Feresev, and Matthias Blubom, all on 2 points. And then we've got Arvind, Tadai, and Vincent all on 1.5, and Anish Giri and Pragdananda Ramesh Babu on 1 point. And that is how things shape up at the end of round 4 of Norway Chess.